Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of the State of Economy podcast. Today we are here to talk about matters of finance. It's not a very hard subject that we're about to discuss. You might say it's something which touches a lot of our nerves, especially if you're a woman listening to this podcast, it certainly would. We're so used to hearing from a lot of people that men manage our finances, we're dependent on men for financial discipline, and so on. But hold your horses. This interesting report by DBS India Bank in partnership with CRISIL points otherwise. We have with us in today's show Mr. Prashant Joshi, who's the Managing Director and Head of Consumer Banking Group, DBS Bank India, and Pushan Sharma, Director Research at CRISIL Market Intelligence and Analytics, deciphering how women really spend their money, how we're independent in deciding how we want to use our money, and for what we really use and consume money. Listening to this conversation.
Hi, good morning to both of you. It's wonderful to have you here on this podcast. Let me get straight into the report. From both of you, if I would like to understand what really motivated DBS and CRISIL to work alongside on a report like this, and why specifically target women across all age population to find out how they consume and how they work around with money.
Yeah, Hamsini, thank you. And from DBS perspective, right, we continue to look at all segments in our customer base to understand their needs and their preferences. So it was only logical that we looked at women as an important segment of the customer base. And also interestingly, over the last 20-25 years or so, the workforce participation of women in India now is over 1/3, right? It's around 37%. And that too in metros, the complexion of the workforce has changed significantly. So one, I think understanding segment needs and their behavior, and then the fact that women as a segment which has really emerged over the last 20 years. Right? I think a combination of these two actually made us look at this particular segment and see what kind of behaviors, particularly in metro cities, are evident from women.
Just to add, to what Prashant said, as we see increasing women participation in the workforce, it becomes very important to understand how women are dealing with their saving and investment strategy, and that's where you can really understand, how you can tailor products better for women, and that's really what was the genesis of the study, to really understand how women are dealing with money, and also to bust certain myths, because it was traditionally considered that women take a lot of advice when it pertains to their investment.
In fact, one of the very interesting takeaways from the report is that women make their own money decisions. Very often it is commented or it is told, while in some of our cases, personally, it's far from truth, that women decisions about finances are influenced by men. Men end up taking the upper hand in prioritizing how money is spent. Your report broke that myth, if I could say. What are the few interesting things that you gathered along the way for you to make an inference like this in the report?
Right. So, what the report clearly points out is that, two things. One is women are taking a lot of their financial decisions independently. And second is that, what the report also shows is that 98% women are involved in long-term family decisions. So they are a critical stakeholder in decisions pertaining to education, buying of assets. And this is pronounced across India. So it's not just specific to certain geographies, but it's across the 10 metro cities that we have studied. So that provides a really interesting, I would say, an insight, as well as it busts certain myths that women are dependent either on their spouse or other family members to actually take these decisions.
Fair enough. I'll take the same question to Prashant, but in a slightly different way. With this sort of a background, Prashant, that women take their own decision on money usage, as a bank, how would you start prioritizing and customizing products more women-centric? Is that a decision enabler for you when it comes to tailoring products for women?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand this. And before I directly answer your question, I'll just say one more point, right? And being a man myself, if someone asked me, do you take your own independent decisions? I will say, of course, yes. Right. Even though actually I may be involving, my wife or my family in the decision making. I think women probably are more authentic and actually saying, what they are saying.
Right.
And in that sense, I think the point that Pushan made around family involvement in long-term decision making, I think is true for both men and women.
Okay.
And probably women are more open in acknowledging either their dependence or participation both on the family. Probably man is less likely to admit to it and suggest that the man himself makes the decision.
Right.
But leaving that aside, I would actually think that it does help understand how women are looking at their finances and their own relationship with money. And it does two things. One is that when either a relationship manager is dealing with a woman, right? I think it clearly helps in tailoring the conversation, because that 1 out of 2 women are more likely to make the decision, in which case you are absolutely going to deal with every customer in the same way, irrespective of whether the customer is a man or woman, right? So I think that's the first thing. The second important thing is that we don't want to design products specifically for women on the basis of stereotypes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we don't want to accept certain stereotypes and then just say, okay, in this survey, for example, 51% women invested in fixed deposits, right? So then let's come out with a woman-centric fixed deposit, right? I mean, it's okay. I think depending on the age, depending on the income level, depending upon the education, life stage, whether a man or woman makes a decision and picks the right product or the right features of the product. So in that sense, we don't want to be coming across as, furthering the stereotypes
Right.
more than what we need to.
Fair enough. Fair enough. The report also makes a very interesting point about adoption of credit cards. It says that 19% of the women don't opt for credit cards for lack of trust, and there are various concerns like difficulty in managing credit card payment, identity threat, etc., which are cited as reasons for avoiding credit card. But alongside that, there is also a very interesting chart which says that the credit card adoption is possibly the highest in Hyderabad, with 98% of your respondents comfortable with the product, and lowest in cities like Chennai and Calcutta, where the adoption rate is a little below 75% or so, 76 and 63% respectively. So when you were doing this, what were the usage that, did you also find a variety in or a change in the usage patterns when you came to women across different cities? The consumption of credit card was different. Their reliance on credit cards was different.
So I think while we certainly do not know what do women do with the credit cards and where they spend the money, I don't think the report talks about that.
Yeah.
But I think the geographies that you mentioned, whether it is Hyderabad or Mumbai or Pune, my hypothesis, at least, is that these are some of the cities where the workforce participation through the information technology sector is probably higher.
Right.
And therefore, per se, from banks also, the offering of credit cards is much more, much easier, and probably that has played a role in higher adoption of credit cards by the women. So that's first point. Second point, which comes across in the report, is the fact that women probably prefer credit cards over unsecured personal loans.
That's true. That's true.
Right. And maybe it's got to do with the fact that in this, women which were interviewed were possibly conservative and risk averse. Then they were okay with short-term credit, rather than taking credit for a longer period of time. Typically, personal loans come for 2 years, 3 years.
Right.
But this is a hypothesis, of course, that maybe they prefer a shorter-term credit over, longer-term unsecured credit, more transactional credit, rather than anything else.
Right. Right. Staying put on the topic of credit, there's also quite a lot of diversity in the way women opt for loans versus what we normally see. At the entry level, it's largely personal loan, vehicle loan, and then home loan after card adoption is high. With women, you're saying that 39% of the most popular category is a home loan. When a woman comes to the approaches a bank for loans, followed by a vehicle loan, and last by personal loan. 39, 33, and 26 is the percentage of in terms of preferences for each of the product. Does it also mean that there is a different outlook that women from your survey had on consumption of money versus what normally men would? In other words, are they really taking, ghar roti makan in the very literal sense compared to what you would normally see in the markets?
Yeah, I just answer one part, and maybe I'll request Pushan to comment thereafter. But the fact is that what you're saying is true. Clearly, what comes across in the report, a larger proportion is looking for home creation and therefore home loans, and then vehicle loans and so on and so forth. But equally, if you look at the age profile of the women and what they are looking at, I think it pretty much tells you the story. Which is that younger women are more looking at personal loans and vehicle loans. And then slightly older women, maybe around 35, start looking at home loans, which is again got to do with your income level and your own work experience probably. And then women start looking at the women's needs change, and then they start looking at retirement solutions, for example, post 45. That I think is consistent with any person, right, whether man or a woman. Where when you start participating in the workforce, you start with unsecured personal loan, vehicle loans, then move to home loans, and so on and so forth. And maybe Pushan can throw some further light on this.
So just to add to what Prashant mentioned, if you look at the short-term and long-term motivation of women that were surveyed across the age groups, in terms of the short-term motivations, what we see is that women aged between 25 to 35 have travel and vacation as one of the critical short-term motivations. Between 36 to 45, it shifts to new businesses, and beyond 45, it goes to health and wellness. We similarly look at the long-term motivations. We see that between 25 to 35, it's buying or upgrading home. So there will be more element of home loan. Then it shifts to education for children. And then in the third cohort, which is above 45 years, it's medical care. So clearly, with age, as the priorities are changing, the type of loan that one would also want would definitely vary as we go along.
Right. There is a very interesting line in your report. It's among the factors that influence lender selection and loan application. One of the challenges that you point out is extensive documentation, a complex application process, delayed home loan approval and disbursal, and high credit score requirement. They are cited as major challenges faced by 60% of salaried women when applying for a loan. What exactly is the reason for the stumbling block? And as banks, is there a way that you'd want to work around this? Because more often than not, and these are some things which even I have faced, especially after marriage, a lot of women do tend to change their names, their surnames, and that may not get documented so well in past records. So these are issues which delay our process. Then there is also, a single woman can't take a loan. It's difficult for a single unmarried woman to take a loan in her own name. She ends up requiring a co-applicant in most of the cases. These are also things that we very often heard from other people, friends and relatives' experiences. 60% is a huge number. Shouldn't you be working to reduce it when we are a very, very wonderful class of borrowers?
No, I would tend to agree actually, and again to the point is that some of these experiences that customers may have had are still probably rooted in bankers' own earlier experiences, with their own credit portfolios. Having said that, I think things are changing. Probably the pace of change needs to be can be faster than what it is. And to your point, having a single loan applicant, and actually whether a man or a woman, right? It's not easy for a bank to make that decision because
Why
again,
so?
if something were to happen, right, to that single applicant, then you don't know where to go to actually. So it's more than credit. I think it's more as to what happens if some unfortunate event happens, right? It's more that consideration which drives that decision rather than the worry about credit. Because frankly, whether a man or a woman, the default rates on home loans is quite low in India per se, right? Compared to any other asset category. That's number one. Number two, credit score, right? I mean, it is absolutely important, because that talks about your intent to pay. And again, whether man or a woman, I think it's an important criterion that lenders will continue to focus on. But the application process and the time taken to give a decision is something that banks have continuously been working on. And I think that the decision making now happens typically within 5 to 7 days, even for a home loan. And then the disbursement procedures can sometimes be complicated. But yes, there's clearly an area where banks can improve both on application process and disbursement process, in my view. And we need to continue to work on that.
Right. And sometimes banks do come up with these teaser rates where if it's a woman applicant, you get a 25 bips or a 50 bips lower rate. But very few women end up, being the first applicant because of all the reasons that we mentioned just now. So while there is a teaser rate, it barely serves the purpose, or it serves the purpose for a very limited population.
That's true, but equally, I mean, and not in the context of the metro cities where we had done the survey.
Right.
But if you look at affordable housing finance, where under the Prime Minister Awas Yojana, there was a certain subsidy which was provided earlier for the loan. It was mandatory to have amongst the applicants a woman. And to my mind, that's a good thing. And it didn't matter whether it was primary applicant or co-applicant. And frankly, because if you have two applicants, the primary and co is just a manner of speaking, just a verbiage. It has no real meaning beyond that.
Okay.
Which clearly meant that women would then own the home asset. Right. And for that, then you would get the subsidy or get a discount. These are actually very good initiatives to make sure that the ownership of that asset actually is with the woman.
Just to add to what Prashant mentioned, with increasing women participation in the workforce and higher representation in mid and senior management, we would definitely see more primary applicants being women in the coming years.
Right. Right. Pushan, possibly this question is targeted at you. Another very interesting takeaway for me from the report was that whether it was preferences to loans, preferences to cards, preference to cash over digital spending, etc., the adoption in Calcutta is very, very low. Why is it really so? Why are they very different from the way average Indian women deal with money?
Right. No, that's completely true. Across multiple parameters, we see that Calcutta has, data points which are quite different from the rest of the country. And we try to dig deeper into what could be the reasons for that. And what it points out to is that much of that could be gender agnostic. If you look at the number of e-transactions per 1,000 people in West Bengal as of January 2024, we see that the e-transactions are only 132. While the India average is about 430, right? So that's gender agnostic and for the entire state. But we see it's almost 1/3 of where the India average is. So that's one of the reasons, why it could be in general for the state like that. Even if you look at some of the choices, say the political choices being made in the state, they are quite different from the rest of the country over the last 3 decades. So clearly, some of the parameters manifest out quite differently in West Bengal and specifically in Kolkata.
Okay. So you're saying don't attach too much to the gender on that factor.
Right.
Fair enough. Let's just shift bases to savings. FDs are a very popular product with women. Health is a priority with women versus other products. And possibly, as you mentioned earlier, there is a age demography factor as well involved in this. From whatever you've surveyed women across spectrum, would it be right to say that women are possibly a little more comfortable to go with tried and tested products versus experiment in domains like cryptos or very fancy F&O products, etc.?
Right. So the report, does point out that women are investing in the traditional modes of investment like fixed deposit, savings account, even gold being a critical source, about 16% being parked in gold. But as you know, there is more exposure to financial instruments, investment instruments, as women see more, there is more time that passes and they see how the returns have panned out across multiple instruments. We see that definitely changing. But some of the asset classes may still dominate, and here gender may play a role. We may see gold still being a critical source of investment. In fact, as per the World Gold Council, there is about 24,000 tons of gold with women in India, which is the largest reserve of gold, almost about 11% of the gold reserves. So that may still stand out, and be gender specific.
Okay. Let me take this question now to Prashant. Now that you know that, these are the preferences that women would like to park their money in, you said that you would not want to do a women-centric FD. But when your RM approaches a woman, would you want to at least tailor make? If you have to manage, let's say, a reasonably net worth female, would you want to tailor make your products to suit or to align with these things? Or how would you want, would this wealth management business a little differently, if I can put my question in a very raw sense?
I think the best way to illustrate this would be to actually give an example of a product that we talk relatively conservative customer who still want to participate in the upside provided by equity markets.
Okay.
And this is a conversation which can easily be had with a woman, in this survey, a representative woman in this survey, where we say, okay, fine. We understand that you want your capital to be protected and that, frankly, as I said, is true of any conservative investor, be it man or a woman. And this, which is fair enough. Then you invest in a fixed deposit, get a monthly or a quarterly interest, and please invest that interest in a systematic investment plan in an equity fund, for example. Now that will ensure that your deposit, which is your capital, does remain protected, with the bank. Through the interest that you're earning on that deposit, you can create your equity investments and get a taste of equity investments, or start participating in the equity upside. And that way you can start tailoring products, which are conservative in nature, but still allow you to participate in the upside. So some of these conversations then can be tailored for existing products, right? Because once you understand the preferences of a particular gender, then it becomes easier in terms of conversations to be had.
Fair enough. There's also a very interesting sentence in your report which says that Pune and Bangalore, you see a lot of women having interest to participate in cryptos, but concern over lack of knowledge and perceived risk prevail. So when you're tailoring products, do you also tell them about the risk? I mean, how does the risk communication work? Or is risk gender neutral?
I think for every investor, there's a risk profiling. And that depends upon your income level, your own understanding, your own sophistication, your life stage, your needs, and frankly, your ability to withstand capital losses, right? And that risk profiling, then really happens with everyone. And then the products, which get offered or talked about are linked to that, right? And in cryptocurrency participation, if you ask me, the knowledge about cryptocurrency and awareness is a different thing. Knowledge is a different thing.
Correct.
Right. And if you asked, in my view, at least, again, it's gender agnostic, because I don't think a man understands any better the knowledge of cryptocurrency is no better. Right. It's probably the ability to punt, if you will, and maybe ability to withstand a little bit of capital losses.
Fair enough. Just to wrap it up, one quick minute to both of you, Prashant and Pushan. If you were to say that this is your key takeaway from the report, what would it be for you, Prashant? And how would it help you bank better with women? And the same question to Pushan. What, in your opinion, is the key takeaway? Is the thing that would remain in your heart from the report for a long time?
For me, actually, two takeaways. One is the fact that all the insights, which emerged from the report are, to me at least, were gender agnostic, right? Wow. And as I said, they actually were driven by age, income, and life stage.
Okay.
And as the workforce participation of women gets more and more, I think the boundaries will collapse even further. That's point number one. Having said that, there are some regional differences clearly. For example, in Chennai and Coimbatore, the incidence of cash, versus UPI payments, or in West Bengal, to the fact that you pointed it out. So that helps us as bankers to say, okay, in which case, in some of these branches, some of these geographies, we need to focus on maybe digital initiatives more compared to others. Equally, in places like Mumbai and Pune, if the stock market participation is higher, then the capital market products that we offer and the conversations around them need to be more intelligent. So it's more about geographic tailoring of conversations and tweaking of products than anything else. But in my view, I think largely it was still gender agnostic.
Great. This is a wonderful takeaway. Pushan, how would you summarize it?
Right. For me, Hamsini, what I see is that, the report busts one clear myth that, it was considered that women don't take financial decisions independently. This talks about majority of women take financial decisions independently. And a further double click on that, what we saw is that in cities where women are taking financial decisions independently, their investments in the risk averse instruments like fixed deposit and savings account is higher. And what that points out to is that these women need to be made more aware about the other instruments, the risks involved, as well as the historical returns. And that provides an opportunity for them to diversify their investment pool, right? So that clearly was a key takeaway for me from the report.
Thank you so much, Prashant and Pushan, for sharing your insights. It was wonderful connecting with you on this report, and it's a brilliant report by itself too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hamsini.
Thank you, Hamsini.